prepare to be astonished as we journey into the heart of an ancient tale that has baffled historians and theologians alike. In our upcoming video, we explore the astounding story of how 185,000 soldiers faced off against an angelic force they could not defeat. Join us as we unravel the mysteries behind this remarkable event and uncover the lessons it holds for us today. Get ready to witness the power and might of the divine in a way you've never seen before. Stay tuned. Are you ready for a story that defies time, full of faith, courage, and miracles? Today we will reveal the epic confrontation between Hezekiah and Sennacherib, where the impossible becomes reality. Every second of this saga is a testament to divine power and human courage, a narrative that goes beyond what you have seen or heard. Subscribe now, press play, and prepare to be transported to a world where the fate of a nation hangs by a divine thread. You can't miss this surprising ending. This is more than a story. It is a journey that will transform your view of faith and courage. Start the adventure right now. The Bible tells incredible stories of how God intervened in the lives of his people, and Hezekiah's path is one of the most emblematic. Unlike his father, Ahaz, Hezekiah was a leader who reverenced God in a notable way, drawing inspiration from David, his ancestor. Imagine this. In the third year of the reign of Hosea, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, ascends to the throne of Judah at the age of 25. Ruling Jerusalem for 29 years, his mother, Abi, daughter of Zechariah, had a significant influence on his life. Hezekiah distinguished himself for his integrity before God, faithfully following the teachings of David. This fascinating story is detailed in 2 Kings 18, 1-3. Among his notable accomplishments, Hezekiah eradicated high places of worship and destroyed sacred sidewalk columns. He also eliminated the veneration of the bronze serpent, Nustan, originally created by Moses as an instrument of healing, as described in Numbers 21-8-9, but which ended up being idolized. Hezekiah, realizing the idolatry, decided to destroy the serpent. Hezekiah is remembered as one of Judah's most virtuous monarchs, a paradigm of obedience and faith, as described in 2 Kings 18 verses 4-5. This account highlights the contrast between Hezekiah and many other kings of Israel and Judah, whose disloyal actions resulted in tragedies. Hezekiah, however, prospered in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. He confronted the powerful king of Assyria, refusing to surrender, and expanded his territory, even conquering Gaza. The political context of that time was extremely unstable. In the 4th year of his reign, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, besieged Samaria and after 3 years captured it, exiling the Israelites. Hezekiah witnessed the suffering of the kingdom of Israel under the yoke of the Assyrians, a punishment for his infidelity to God. In the 14th year of his rule, Sennacherib, another Assyrian monarch, attacked Judah, conquering all its fortified cities except Jerusalem. At a critical moment in his rule, Hezekiah, the ruler of Judah, faced the colossal challenge from Sennacherib, the fearsome king of Assyria. After the capture of the fortified cities of Judah, except Jerusalem, Hezekiah realized that he had underestimated the seriousness of the situation. He sent messengers to Sennacherib at Lachish, acknowledging his mistake and offering a ransom to save Jerusalem. The price was astronomical, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold, forcing Hezekiah to deplete the treasures of the temple and the palace, even stripping the temple doors of gold. But Sennacherib was not satisfied with the rescue alone. Even after receiving payment, he sent an imposing delegation to Jerusalem to demand the city's complete surrender. The Assyrian group, formed by Tartan, Rapsaris and Rapsake, positioned themselves next to the aqueduct of the upper pool. They were not received by Hezekiah, but by his emissaries, Eliakim, Shevna and Joah. The tension in Jerusalem was almost palpable, with the Assyrian threat looming over the besieged city. Hezekiah was facing a delicate situation with the fate of his people in the balance. Hezekiah's faith and divine intervention were about to be tested. During the siege, Rapshake, spokesman for the Assyrian king, openly challenged Hezekiah's representatives. He questioned what they really placed their trust in, ridiculing any hope in strategy or military force. Who do they trust? he asked, despising the alliance with Egypt, comparing it to a fragile and brittle staff. He went further, questioning their faith in the Lord, the God of Israel, remembering that Hezekiah had eliminated the altars and demanded that they only worship in Jerusalem. Ironically, he even proposed providing horses to Hezekiah, doubting Judah's ability to raise an efficient army. Rabsake's most disturbing claim was that the campaign of destruction itself was a divine plan. Although a false statement, it threatened to destabilize the morale of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, who were already aware of Israel's calamitous fate under Assyrian rule and now faced a similar threat. Hezekiah faced a double challenge. Not only the military threat imposed by Assyria, but also the need to strengthen the faith and spirit of its people, now under intense psychological pressure. It was a critical moment, a severe test of the resilience and belief of both the king and his people. Faced with this imminent danger, Eliakim, Shebna and Joah, emissaries of Hezekiah, begged Rabshakeh to speak in Aramaic, seeking to prevent the population of Jerusalem from hearing the intimidating words. Disdainfully, however, Rabshakeh chose to speak in Hebrew, ensuring that everyone on the wall heard his terrifying announcement. He loudly proclaimed that Hezekiah was incapable of saving the people and that not even their faith in the Lord could defend them against powerful Assyria. Rabshakeh's statements were harsh and cruel, anticipating a devastating fate for those who resisted. He sought to undermine Hezekiah's leadership and the people's conviction in God, in order to destroy their hope and confidence. The message was clear: surrender or facing terrible consequences. But Rabshakeh's cunning went further. He tried to seduce the inhabitants of Jerusalem with promises of peace and prosperity under Assyrian rule. "Come to me," he proclaimed, "and enjoy a quiet life with your own vineyards and wells, until you are brought to a land as prosperous as yours." These promises, apparently tempting, were presented as a contrast to the reality of a prolonged siege. This scenario reflects the temptations we all face in critical moments, where deceptive proposals and illusory promises can seem attractive. Like Hezekiah and his people, we are urged to remain steadfast in our beliefs and faith, even in the face of the most compelling threats. The confrontation between Hezekiah and the king of Assyria escalated to a fever pitch. Rabshakeh, in his provocative speech, questioned whether any god could really save his people from the hands of the king of Assyria. He mentioned examples of divinities from other regions who failed to protect their followers, challenging the idea that the Lord could rescue Jerusalem. The citizens of Jerusalem, obeying Hezekiah's orders, remained silent. Rabshakeh's provocations. The king's representatives returned to him, visibly disturbed and with torn clothes as a sign of mourning and despair. They communicated to the king the defiant words of Rabshakeh, who had openly disrespected their faith and their God. This episode is documented in 2 Kings 19, 1-4. When Hezekiah became aware of what was happening, he shared the same anguish of his people. In a gesture of deep regret, he tore his clothes and, dressed in sackcloth, sought refuge in the house of the Lord. He sent his messengers, also dressed in sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, carrying a message that resonated with desperation and supplication, hoping that Isaiah would intercede with the Lord. Hezekiah knew that he was facing a period of great tribulation and humiliation, and that only a divine miracle could reverse this calamitous situation. This phase in Hezekiah's journey teaches us about the importance of maintaining faith, even in the darkest moments. Despite being a devout king and having revitalized the worship of the God of Judah, Hezekiah faced a terrible crisis. This moment highlights that even the most faithful are not exempt from facing intense adversity. But it is in adversity where the authenticity and strength of faith are truly revealed. In the midst of his anguish, Hezekiah did not turn away from God. On the contrary, he sought even more intensely for their guidance and support. As recorded in 2 Kings 19, 5-7, Hezekiah's emissaries hastened to find Isaiah carrying heavy threats from the Assyrian king. Isaiah, the bearer of divine revelation, brought words of comfort and promise. "Do not fear." He assured that God was attentive to Rabshakeh's blasphemies and that a divine plan was already in action. God would incite unrest in the heart of the king of Assyria, leading him to return to his land where he would meet his destiny. The divine guarantee was clear: Jerusalem would not fall and Sennacherib would have a tragic end. This episode is described in 2 Kings 19, 8-13. However, Sennacherib was not ready to back down. While besieging Libnah, another fortress of Judah, he learned of the advance of Taraka, the king of Ethiopia, against him. Taking advantage of a brief interval in the siege of Jerusalem, Sennacherib sent another letter to Hezekiah reiterating his threats and mockery. He insisted that Jerusalem, like many other cities, would not escape destruction. He remembered the fate of nations and cities devastated by his predecessors, doubting the ability of Hezekiah's God to defend Jerusalem. Faced with this new wave of threats, Hezekiah took an attitude of extraordinary faith and submission. He took the letter with Sennacherib's threats, went to the house of the Lord and presented it before God. This symbolic, but powerful act, manifested his total trust and dependence on God in the face of a desolate situation. In the midst of turmoil and fear, Hezekiah sought refuge and guidance in the divine presence. This gesture is described in detail in 2 Kings 19, 14-19. This episode in Hezekiah's life highlights the vitality of faith, even when circumstances seem insurmountable. By bringing his concerns before God, Hezekiah reminds us that in times of crisis, true strength lies in seeking divine wisdom and trusting in his providence. Faced with the relentless threat of the king of Assyria, Hezekiah turned to the only source of hope he knew: prayer. He stood before the Lord, not only as the king of Judah, but as a humble servant, pleading for divine intervention. In his fervent prayer, Hezekiah exclaimed, "O Lord, God of Israel, who reigns above the cherubim, you are the only true God of all the kingdoms of the earth." He prayed for God to appear, not only to save his people, but for all nations to recognize his unique sovereignty. This striking scene is recounted in 2 Kings 19 verse 20-28. In his prayer, Ezekiel stressed the distinction between the God of Israel and the inanimate deities worshipped by the nations subjugated by Assyria. He was aware that, in contrast to these inert idols, the Lord was a living and active God, fully capable of protecting and rescuing his people. This emotional prayer was a cry for God to defend his name and his people from the affronts of Sennacherib. God's answer came through the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah brought Hezekiah the assurance that the Lord had heard his prayer. The divine response was a direct rebuke to Sennacherib. "The virgin, daughter of Zion, despises you and mocks you," the Lord proclaimed, highlighting that the arrogance of the Assyrian king against the saint of Israel would have retaliation. God revealed how Sennacherib boasted of his conquests but emphasized that it was all part of his divine plan. The Lord declared that he himself would guide Sennacherib's destiny, forcing him to return the same way he came. This response from God is a powerful reminder that, despite the circumstances, he maintains control over world events. He hears the pleas of his people and responds in ways that demonstrate his power and supremacy. Hezekiah's story teaches us about the essentiality of faith, especially in times of great challenges and uncertainties. God, through Isaiah, again answered Hezekiah's fervent prayer. The divine response came in the form of a sharp criticism of Sennacherib's, evidencing the presumption and blasphemy of the Assyrian king against the saint of Israel. Sennacherib, in his arrogance, failed to recognize that he was only an instrument in the hands of God, fulfilling a greater purpose within the divine sovereign plan for the nations. His illusion of controlling the destiny of the nations was unmasked by the divine revelation that God knew his every step and intention and that his defeat was imminent. Sennacherib's nose, symbolizing his humiliating retreat into Assyria. This striking symbolism is described in 2 Kings 19 verses 29-31. Additionally, God provided a sign for Hezekiah and the people of Judah, a promise of sustenance and renewal. Despite the siege and the threat of shortages, God assured that there would be spontaneous harvests during the next 2 years, guaranteeing the survival of the town. In the third year they could resume planting and harvesting, symbolizing a renewal and a new beginning. A remnant of Judah, God promised, would survive and flourish. This promise reflects God's unwavering commitment to his people and his glory. Finally came God's definitive statement. Jerusalem would be safe from the invasion of Syria. Sennacherib will not enter this city, the Lord proclaimed with authority. the holy city would not be hit by the enemy's arrows, nor would it suffer under a devastating siege. God promised to defend Jerusalem, not only for the good of the people, but also for the sake of his own name and in honor of his faithful servant David. Jerusalem would be a living symbol of divine power and God's loyalty to his alliance. This passage powerfully highlights the power of prayer and the supremacy of God in the face of the most intimidating threats. The dramatic outcome of the story reaffirms that, even in the darkest hours, faith and trust in God are sources of hope and redemption. History is a powerful testimony to human dependence on God and his ability to intervene in miraculous and unexpected ways. Sennacherib's siege of Jerusalem was destined to end not by human efforts, but by extraordinary divine intervention. God's promise to protect Jerusalem was a commitment not only to his people, but also a demonstration of respect for his name and a continuation of his promise to David. This promise extended beyond the line of David, foreshadowing the coming of Jesus Christ, a descendant of David, who would inaugurate an eternal kingdom. The fulfillment of the divine promise occurred in a surprising way. During the night, an angel of the Lord attacked the Assyrian camp, resulting in the death of 185,000 soldiers. This heavenly intervention left an indelible mark that God is in control and powerful to save. Sennacherib, faced with an incredible defeat, was forced to retreat to Nineveh, abandoning his army and his expansionist ambitions. The final irony for Sennacherib came while he was worshipping at a temple in Nineveh, where he was murdered by his own sons. This outcome echoes the defeat of Goliath, who mocked the God of Israel and met a shameful end. Just as the God of the Philistines failed to protect Goliath, the God of Sennacherib could not save him. The victory over the Assyrians and the preservation of Jerusalem are reminders of God's sovereignty over nations and history. God defends his people and honors his promises regardless of the severity of the circumstances. The saga of Hezekiah, Sennacherib, and divine providence remains an eternal testimony of God's fervor for his people and his unwavering fidelity to his word. And so we close our incredible journey through the history of Hezekiah and Sennacherib, full of twists and divine interventions. But remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the fascinating stories we have to share. If you were inspired by this epic saga and want to explore more mysteries and historical adventures, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Here, each video is a new adventure, a new lesson, a new opportunity to wonder. Don't forget to leave your like and comment. Tell us what you thought of this story and what else you would like to discover. Your insights are valuable to us and help shape the future of our content. Share this video with friends and family. You never know who else may be touched by these incredible stories. And stay tuned, we have many other exciting narratives on the way, stories that will pique your curiosity, touch your heart, and expand your mind. So, follow us so you don't miss a moment of these extraordinary discoveries. Thank you for joining us here. Keep exploring, learning, and getting inspired with us. Until next time, and remember, every story we share is a window to a world of unexplored wonders.